Hi, I'm James Jenkins, and you're watching What's Your Story, Vancouver. On tonight's episode, we have lovely Jessicka. She's a local Vancouver singer-songwriter and having a great year so far. You've been pretty busy. You had new videos coming out, a new album. You've been on tour, on the road. Give us a little background on yourself.
Originally from Hope, BC, and moved to the city to be a dancer.
So you moved here from Hope to be a dancer.
Yeah, and that didn't really work out.
Okay.
For, I guess, a number of reasons, but picked up music a couple years after and then just kind of rolled with that. And in the last 2 or 3 years, it's kind of picking up steam. So now I've got an album coming out, got all these music
Just
videos.
like that, right? Just next thing you know, you got an album coming out. And
yeah.
The album's called Happy Place. Happy Place.
The last EP was called Happy Place.
The new one is, what's the new one called?
The new one, that's the new one. It just came out like 2 weeks ago.
Okay,
it's kind of confusing because there's 2 EPs and then we're going to release full vinyl later this year. So, yeah, the latest release is Happy Place. So basically all the music is out there at this point.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what is your happy place?
Not with the person that I wrote that song about.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate, or do you wish not to? Or?
I was in like basically a 10-year relationship of sorts with this girl that I met in high school. And it was just a really toxic friendship sort of thing. And it just lasted way too long and I couldn't see what was happening. Everyone around me was like, are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? But I couldn't see it and just stayed in it for so long, and she was so fucking crazy, like just so crazy. And yeah, a couple years ago I was like so thankful to be out of that situation and with someone who's so great. And you know, just reminiscing on.
Did you have that song in your pocket for a while?
No, it just suddenly I was, you know, a couple chords went down and I was, you know, you kind of maybe riff a little on the chords, and the concept of happy place, you know, just I think that song is mostly a juxtaposition of your actual happy place and you're in, you know, this terrible situation, and the best time you ever had in that relationship was when you were not in it mentally.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Well, how do you describe your songwriting process?
It's so varied. Like sometimes I'm just walking down the street and words or a rhythm or a melody will pop in my head and I'll sing along to that, and then maybe sing into your phone a little, like those are the lines. Yeah, you like things just pop in your head, and if it's a strong idea, or if it's one, maybe it's not strong, but it's one that you like, you just go back to it over and over again. Then maybe you sit at the piano and do chords, or it's the completely other process where you have chords and it's a question of whether you have words for it or not, and then trying to figure out from the chords where to go lyrically and vocally. It's, for me, it's a total mishmash. It could be either way.
Can you tell us who helped produce, or who produced the album?
Bradley Ferguson. Yeah.
Does it help that, it must help that you guys are married and then kind of living in the, same?
We were doing music together way before we were.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you that, actually.
Yeah.
Did you guys meet through music?
I was going and taking vocal lessons at the Drum Center close to Granville Island, and he was working the front desk there. And that's how we initially met. And I like gave him some Christmas cookies one time, and he pulled my number out of the books and called me up. I was like, thanks for the cookies. I was like, oh, I have a new friend.
Yeah, nice.
He like stalked me through the school books.
Can you tell us a little something about the process of this last album, like the producing and kind of living with your producer?
Okay, yeah, we about 4 or 5 years ago, we did a session of songs, a batch of songs, and I really wanted to have this kind of concert band orchestra vibe where there was a lot of strings, a lot of clarinet, sax. You know, did we do saxophone? I don't know. Trumpet. We did a lot of organic instruments, but manipulated them. And I was so excited about this. I was listening to a lot of St. Vincent at the time and thought that was a a direction that I wanted to go in. And sure enough, we do these songs and they sound beautiful. And then I did a couple performances and thought, well, how are we going to perform this? Because I'm a big fan of performing the material the way it sounds on the album. But in a city like Vancouver, and I guess many cities now, it's almost impossible to do that because you have to pay your musicians, unless you're so lucky to have musicians on board with you already that are willing to maybe put in themselves to your project. But it just became so unattainably financially like crippling,
Yeah.
So I worked this kind of career for a little while and then reevaluated everything and was like, how can I perform? Like, how could music be a vessel for performance for me? Because that's like my real, music is of course a huge part of it, but performance has always been a huge part of my kind of existence. And so I thought really hard, and Brad and I talked about it a lot, what feels good and what could I actually portray on stage in a way that isn't just tied to a piano or tied to, kind of voicings of music that I don't feel compelled to move to. So we, kind of went to pop music, which we both love. And I've always loved pop music, unabashedly. Like when Britney Spears came out, I was like, that's my jam.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was the whole genesis of it. And also we started to get into hip hop as well. So taking kind of an unabashed look at what we truly love to listen to and putting that to the lyrics that could be spun in many ways, but trying to spin them in more of that kind of a way.
You were with 604.
Yeah.
604 Records. How did that come about?
So Bradley said, you know what you do when you have a song that you like is you just email it to a bunch of record labels. So emailed Jonathan Simkin at 604, and within a day he got back to me. He's like, oh, this song sounds good. I like this. What else are you up to? Maybe we should have a meeting.
Yeah.
So I went and met with him, and this went on for about, I'd say 10 months or so.
Oh, wow.
That I would just go in for random meetings, and then he asked, do you have any songs that you'd like to demo at our studio? So I took one in and demoed it, just vocals and piano at their studio. And after that, I think I sent him another vocal and piano thing I did at a venue, and he kind of, at that point, pulled the trigger. Like, we had developed a relationship at that, like a repertoire. It's not repertoire. What's the word I'm looking for? And he at that point was like, you know what? I'd like to go ahead with this. Let's record 5 songs and do an EP. Is that even how it started? I don't know. This whole thing has been
a
so
blur, right?
Well, it's a bit of a blur, and also it's been so piecemeal. Like, we did the demo, we did the EP. Once we were about wrapping up the first EP in the recording process, he heard a bunch of it, and he's like, you know what? If you have 5 more songs, let's do a second EP. So it's just kind of like been rolling itself along like a snowball down a hill ever since the first time we met, sort of. And and then I'm on Light Organ, and it's great. They're so supportive.
Yeah. Did you go into the studio at 604 and just kind of bang out some your favorite songs kind of thing you had already kind of prepared?
Well, I'd had a bunch of the songs kicking around for a while, and our process is actually to have them as ready as possible at home. Bradley will take all the lyrics. He'll actually make a bunch of the beats, all the beats basically, and then we hired a couple musicians like Ali from Mother.
So you're saying you had some other musicians involved, like Ryan, and you're about to name off some people before the train interrupted
Ali
us.
Siadat on all the drums. Chris Jestrin, who's a phenomenal keys, synth, organ. He can anything with keys on it, and even everything without. Like, he's just on it. So good. And then Bradley played bass, and I think that was it. And Jesse Zubat played strings on everything. Yeah. All the string songs.
How long did it take you to record everything?
To get it all done?
Yeah.
I think we spent a week in the studio for the first EP, and about a week for the second EP, and then when mixing comes around, you spend another 5 or 6 days you know, you go back for each song, and but we kind of mix as we go along. So, yeah.
Seems like the song titles for all your song titles are the story of my life, pretty much.
Really?
Yeah, just joking, but a little bit of humor, but I can definitely relate. Yeah.
Yeah, I just kind of went for. There was so long that I tried to songwrite like, really, you know, I want to songwrite like Radiohead, or you know, be so metaphorical or mysterious with my lyrics. And there was one day where I just sat down and just was like, wow, like stream of consciousness, like rage on the pen. And that's obviously my jam.
Yeah.
It's totally how I vibe for songwriting. It works so much better than being super careful and thoughtful about it.
A mutual friend of ours, Andy Boots, he says that he thinks that you sound like Fiona Apple. And actually, I agree. Growing up, did you have any influences musically, or even today, do you have like anyone that you kind of listen to a lot, or that kind of inspires you? Or?
My original influences, I bought that Fiona Apple When the Pawn, blah 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 blah, her second album. I bought it off Columbia House.
Yo,
well,
no
actually,
way.
my
Wow.
parents bought it after many collectors called.
Who didn't go to the Columbia House racket?
Yeah,
Like,
I did.
6 albums for like 6 cents or something like that, and then I had that too.
I definitely did like the 20 for 20.
20 for 20, yeah.
And you're a kid, like you don't have $20. You
know.
just signed up for it. It was like a way of like
What were they thinking?
they were just screwing parents over hardcore.
Exactly.
So I picked all these albums based on their covers.
So you based everything you bought on the covers?
Yeah, so I got Beck Odelay, Fiona Apple, When the Pawn, a bunch of others. I can't even begin to remember. Like, it came in such an onslaught, and I was so excited. But that was the one that I attached to 100%. And I listened to it for probably 5 years straight. Just and that was the first album that I had a growing appreciation for. There were the songs that I loved right off the bat, and then there were the songs that grew on me over the years, and I sang along to it. Like growing up in a small town, you have a car, you drive everywhere, and
that's the greatest album test, really, is the car.
Isn't it? Yeah.
I think
so. That was the first. I mean, my first CD ever was Tragic Kingdom by No Doubt. So she was the first singer I sang along to obsessively. But then that Fiona Apple album, and I have the theory that the people that you sing along to, your voice trains itself to the way that they sing. Like, they're your formative influences.
Yeah. I think I've heard, like you say, Keith Richards say this too, and you learn off the radio, basically. You learn how to play. So all these influences that you grew up listening to definitely has to come through you somehow in your playing or in your singing or songwriting even. So definitely, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And like people, this is where it actually got my mind spinning, is that people listen to Muse and they say, what a Tom York ripoff. Like, he's ripping him off 100% vocally. And I wonder, did he just grow up singing along to Radiohead?
Maybe, yeah.
That's maybe where it came from. And
well, that's music. It's all piracy, really. Music.
It is. It totally is.
Every band's ripped out. Like, it's not ripping off. It's just you borrow from. It all goes way to the blues and all the jazz and stuff, right? Like, you can kind of.
Oh, you can trace it back.
Every
one to
every
another.
good band,
Yeah.
So, if you like. You too, then you like follow who they follow, who they listen to, and who they listen to. Like Led Zeppelin and the Stones, they liked, you know what I mean, all the Memphis and Chicago blues, and like Chuck Berry's and goes way back, So you find out who their influences were, and then it's kind of like a history lesson in music, basically.
Yeah, if you go down that path.
Yeah. So and like everyone's ripped off everybody in some way, shape, or form.
Well, fully these days, I hear a song I like, and I go to Bradley, and I'm like, let's do that. Let's just do that. And by the time you're done with it, it doesn't sound anything like that song.
Exactly. You put your own stamp on it.
Yeah.
I think, right?
Yeah.
I think like a lot of producers will probably ask a band or artist to bring them music that they're listening to or what they want to sound like, maybe. I'm not sure if that still happens. I've read stories about that.
Well, the first that's always been Bradley's MO. The first time we ever worked together, I was such a noob. He's like, give me a couple examples of what you like. And I made like this 25 long, 25 song CD, like burned it for him.
Yeah,
I was like,
nice.
here, this is all of it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that was why we couldn't narrow it down into anything quite so specific or, honed in enough. But yeah, this time it was just like,
The little guy's still there, right? That's crazy.
my little buddy.
So do you have anyone mentoring you through this whole process? Is Brad basically kind of
It's the two
guiding
of
you?
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're in it together.
And totally in it
Yeah,
together.
exactly.
And
So
We-
lucky to have, someone like that to be able to work with
it is, I feel like it is lucky.
24/7, yeah.
And it gets better and better. Like it just, the more we work together, obviously, the easier it gets. I mean, I
Yeah.
think maybe for some people it spins in the opposite direction where maybe there's a spark immediately and then it fades out. But I feel like we've worked up from being in completely different musical influences to where we are now. Even though we have an appreciation for the same kind of music, it's been from two different workplaces that we've come to this point, and it's
Exactly.
awesome. It's working so well. I'm so happy about it.
Nice. You also have do you have your own record label? I noticed there's a 604 Records, and there's another record label that was mentioned on all your...
Oh,
on
Light
YouTube.
Organ.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Light Organ is the creative side of 604. It's
Okay.
kind of, I shouldn't say the creative side. It's like the indie version of 604.
I see.
Yeah, so that's what I'm actually signed to. Is
Okay.
Light Organ,
Nice.
but under the umbrella of 604.
Okay.
Yeah. When
Do you have any advice for someone else like yourself, trying to like get signed, get an album made, kind of thing?
The advice that Jonathan gave to me when I was having those initial meetings with him was to not worry about writing for anything, but to write what felt natural to you. I kind of confided in him that I felt a certain pressure to achieve like a radio writing sort of status. And he said, why would you worry about that? That's not why I was interested in your songs, just write what made you write that song. Just do whatever you felt during that. And I thought that was so cool. And it actually really turned me around. And I wrote a bunch of songs after that, after maybe a couple of years of not really writing very many songs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Kind of opened the floodgates.
It did.
Yeah.
I was like, I reevaluated like the song that he was interested in initially. I thought, what happened there? And it was that stream of consciousness thing that I had always been trying to avoid or try to like push to the side. Like that's not going to work. I should be more mysterious or theatrical or like metaphorical. And then when I indulged myself in that style of writing, so much started coming out. So not only that, but also making sure that I was having fun when I was making music and that the whole process felt enjoyable. Because as soon as, for me at least, I know maybe some other people work differently, but for me it was, as soon as I started kicking myself about any aspect of it, it all just like went down to zero.
Really?
Down to nothing, yeah. And that's not to say that you can't study and and hone your craft, but it should probably be an enjoyable experience. Otherwise, you might as well be toiling away at some fucking bullshit job.
Yeah, exactly. When did you first realize you had a voice?
I always wanted to be a singer.
Yeah.
And then in grade 4, some guy made fun of me because I said that I wanted to be a singer, and he's like, "Oh, like some fat opera singer?" Or he made some stupid joke about like the horns and like being fat.
Yeah,
and for whatever reason, I totally owned that as a 4th grader. I was like,
no way.
No, they'll think I'm stupid.
Yeah.
So
that really impacted you in 4th grade, and it's funny how kids react to
hugely.
things.
Yeah.
What you say to them.
And I remember the moment. I was certain all I wanted to ever be was a singer. And that one moment totally threw me for years. And then I did musical theater in high school. I was the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. And my musical teacher, who I actually really liked and respected and appreciated, really gave me a hard time about the singing aspect because I was still so terrified, but I really wanted to try. And I think through that production, just being on stage and performing kind of relit the thing, but I parlayed it into dance. I was like, oh, I'll do dance. And I did hip hop for a long, like hip hop style dance for a while. And then, as I said earlier, like it worked itself out into what I originally had always intended.
Did somebody hear you singing along to a song and say, oh, wow, you got some chops, or you got like,
no
one's ever like said anything to you?
Because I don't sing along in public.
No?
I'm not one of those people, no.
No way.
Like, I've always been in the car with girlfriends and they're all singing and having fun, and I'm just like, what are you guys doing? Like, is this for real?
Do you sing in the shower?
Yeah, because that's where ideas can come.
Yeah, definitely. You put a clip of that video you recently done, music video you did. How was that shoot?
The Penniless Fools video?
Yeah.
That was a really fun shoot because all the other ones before that were so highly conceptualized.
Yeah.
And that one was like, okay, wear a normal outfit and do semi-normal things out in the desert. And I grew up in Merritt. Like, I spent my whole life in Hope, but every summer I go up to Merritt. So we went and shot up there because we wanted to contrast like this sort of arid desert look to the like metal and glass of the city. And being up there was just lovely in and of itself, but to have the freedom to just like kind of do whatever and not worry about, am I gonna drown on this take, or like, how about this tutu? You know, it was like
Who shoots your videos?
Daniel Keane is the in-house videographer for 604.
Okay, I think we've actually met him with Theon. How do you feel like when you're on stage then?
I always feel nervous, of course, but these days, like after the Brampton show, we did Hillside and Guelph, and already I love Guelph. It's so beautiful. And I saw my first cardinal there. Never saw him before. It was amazing. And we did a show on a good stage, and it was at a good time. Like, it was at about 4 o'clock. And we had already done a workshop that morning, which I'm actually so thankful for. I was so nervous when we went into it because I've never done a workshop, and there's a certain amount of improvisation that's kind of expected from those situations. But we played with plants and animals, and they jammed on all our songs, and a Washington, D.C. band called Mesthetics, which is kind of this math rocky instrumental band.
Okay.
Everyone was so awesome. They jammed the shit out of our songs. It was so great. And thank God we did that, because I shook the cobwebs out at 11 a.m. and then we did our set at 4, and it felt like a really good show. And I feel like it's taken definitely a couple of maybe misfires to understand how the energy needs to come off stage.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Which I feel like I bring a lot of energy to my show, but you can bring a lot of energy, but it can maybe sometimes not get out into the audience.
Oh, really?
So getting it actually out to people instead of just having it with yourself on stage is the thing that I'm really interested in right now.
Yeah.
Making that,
Trying to hone that. And
just like projecting a bit and
Exactly.
involving the audience. It can be so terrifying. It's like a bunch of strangers, and my banter can be terrible. I'm just like, so
what's up?
just like waiting for Bradley to figure out what he's doing on his like endless instruments over there, like making the whole set happen, and it's like, I'm from Vancouver.
How are you doing?
Yeah, it's lame. So
Well, besides that one show, was it Brampton, or is it? Besides that one, how have people kind of been receiving your music so far?
Oh, I've got great feedback so far. And even Hillside, which was, again, another sit-down audience, like, they didn't quite get into it. I think the music was maybe a little out of place. Slightly out of place. But, there's been a trickling in over Instagram or email that's like, oh, I saw that performance. And just those tiny little things. Even at the Brampton show, one of the girls that was working the technical side of things, she was like, oh, I really liked that. And it actually, I never believed this, but if one person says something nice about what you did, it really makes the difference.
Definitely.
It's like, okay, all that effort was definitely, it was worth it.
Well, Jessicka, thank you so much for being in the hot seat tonight. really appreciate you coming over.
Thanks for
Putting up
having
with the
me.
trains and automobiles and all the different noises and stuff. And thank you so much for watching tonight, the Sunset edition, I guess, of What's Your Story Vancouver. Please like, share, and subscribe. And thanks again to our sponsor, Kala Fitness, and everyone else that's been watching and supporting. Yes, please like, share, and subscribe.
What's your story, Vancouver? Our city, our stories.